Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Daily Word. Thanks for joining us again. My name's Kyle. I'm one of the pastors here at Redeemer, and we're going to continue our study in the book of Revelation. So if you have your Bible, you can open to Revelation 12. And just as a reminder of kind of where we are, we're sort of in the culmination of God pouring out his judgment on the world here. And we're in a sort of a parenthetical scene where yes, we're in the flow of information going on, but it's sort of like, okay, this happened, then this happened. And by the way, as this is happening, there's this scene going on right here. So we're kind of in the middle of this little parenthetical scene here. So we've just seen in chapter 11, the temple open in heaven and lightnings and rumblings, and we see the Ark of the Covenant up there. And then we see a great sign appear in heaven in chapter 12. Now that tells us something interpretively right there, that we're looking at a picture, a sign that represents something. So we see, in a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, given agony in birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems, and his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. So the dragon stood before the woman as she was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So again, we have that 1260 days number, 3.5 years. We're looking at some interesting things here, but what we want to remember is a sign in heaven. We're looking at a vision, a picture of something, okay? And in our understanding, our theology of understanding visions mean they represent something, and they don't exactly always mean exactly a literal interpretation. Now, we literally interpret the text exactly how the author intended to use the text, but he's using a vision to show us something, and God gave him that vision. So this great sign that we see, this woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and her crown of 12 stars, and she's pregnant, giving birth. This is a picture of Israel bringing forth the Messiah, the 12 stars, the 12 tribes of Israel, and this red dragon is Satan. And he sweeps a third of the stars out of heaven. That's when he fell and took a third of the angels with him. And he's trying to come and destroy the child, but God is preserving his son. And that's what's going on in this picture. And so then we see, moving into verse 7, and a war arose in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. Those stars he swept away fought back, and he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. Well, that tells us something interesting, because that meant Satan had a place before God in heaven. We saw that actually in the first chapter of the book of Job, where the sons of God come and present themselves before God, and Satan also came with them, and he talks to the Lord about Job. But now the serpent is no longer welcome, and he says, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. See, that's how we know that this great dragon was Satan, because the text says so, right? And oftentimes the text clarifies what it means here. Like, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. So who is that? Well, he's described that way. Jesus is described that way in the Old Testament. So we take this for what it means here. And these angels were thrown down with him, and he heard a loud voice from heaven, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Did you know that the word Satan, the name Satan, it's actually ha-satan in Hebrew, it's the Satan, means the accuser. He's the accusing lawyer standing before God, casting a case against humanity and every person. And Jesus stands before God and says, that person is mine, that person is paid for. So this great accuser of the brethren has been thrown down, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, and he knows his time is short. So we're getting close to the end of the tribulation here. And then it says, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child, that is Israel. He pursued Israel, but the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. That's a year, 2 years, and half a year. So that's 3.5 years. That's the 1260 days we saw earlier. Then the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away, but the earth came to help the woman. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war of the rest of her offspring and to those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Now, we remember earlier in the text, a few chapters before, in chapter 7, that God had preserved 12,000 of every tribe of Israel. And those were representative of the preserved. And those preserved of Israel are who this woman is representing here, that the Satan is trying to pursue them, to destroy them, so that Jesus cannot return and make a covenant with his covenant people. And God is saying, no, I'm going to send them into the wilderness and preserve them during this time. So a lot of interesting things happening in this chapter. And I know that was kind of a quick read through. But what the main things that we want to remember here are theology of visions. When we read a vision, if the author intended us to see something else besides what is actually being described, then we can still interpret the text literally by seeing what the author intended us to see, which is that we had signs in heaven that represented other things. So John's being shown a picture of Israel giving birth to the Messiah and Satan trying to destroy the Messiah, God preserving the Lord, and then Satan's rebellion trying to destroy God's covenant people before he can redeem them, and God's sovereignty saying, no, that is not my plan, and you will not thwart my ways. So hopefully that's interesting to you. Hopefully that's encouraging, that we know that we have a God in heaven who is sovereign, who has a plan, and who is not going to let even the most powerful of the wicked angels, who is still a servant of his, undo those plans that he has for us and for Israel, that last generation of Israel who are his covenant people as well. So hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Actually, no, we'll see you next week back in the Daily Word in Revelation 13. Take care.